One, two. I feel like a rock star. It's awesome. Okay, I brought some notes because I tend to ramble. Anyway, as Tim mentioned in the bio, I didn't know what he wanted for me to, when he asked me to do this, so we've had some discussions and I'll try and do what it is he hopes I can accomplish here. Just quickly, I was diagnosed with Becker muscular dystrophy at 13. No, it's not MS. Most people say, I have a friend with MS. It's like not the same thing. It is progressive. So my particular problem in life is dealing with being able to do something at one point in your life and then 6 months later not being able to do it anymore. As it relates to work, that does offer some problems because the employer never really knows when they're done accommodating, right? So it creates a bit of an issue for them. As Tim mentioned in the bio, I grew up in a small town. I was born in Liverpool, and I know all the women were expecting a British accent, but sorry. When you're 5 years old and girls are going, say something, you choose to lose the accent. Then when you're 18, you realize chicks dig accents, and you wonder what you were doing. Anyway, so I grew up in a small town, which was very beneficial, but I knew I wasn't ready for university coming straight out of high school. I wanted to maintain as much mobility as I could, so I chose to work at my father's local store for 3 years. And once I started falling a little too much, then that's when I realized time to go to school. But I'd already done the university level courses in high school because I always knew I was eventually going to be going to university. And going to university, I took advantage of Society for Manitobans with Disabilities sponsorship. I think it was still called the Crippled Children's back then. I'm that old. At the time, they asked me what I wanted to do. And I looked at things like, I took the approach, well, what do I want to do? I looked at dentistry and realized that putting a drill through the side of someone's face would probably not be good for malpractice insurance. And decided that was probably not something I wanted to do. Looked into on-air radio, and when I realized that you have to go to God knows how many northern towns before you finally end up in the big city, I thought they don't have the support I'll need up there. So basically, yeah, I had to be practical. And I mention this because all too often we are told in life that you can be anything you want to be. And I always sort of take the approach that that's not quite true. The only way, I believe it's the only way to be what you want to be is to work at it. And then you have a shot. No one's going to guarantee that you're going to get that dream. No one, it's that way for everyone. It's just particularly a bit more vivid for people with a disability. I found it very interesting listening to the previous presenter in terms of the obstacles she's faced at work. And it's very interesting to see the difference between being able to have the physical abilities to get the training you need to do the job and then running smack into a wall of a communication problem. I don't have a communication problem. I had a physical, can I actually do it problem. So it was a slightly different thing. I would suspect the communication problem is more annoying personally, but that would just be what I would suspect. It'd be much more frustrating to deal with people in that regard. Anyway, I worked during university. I worked for 3 summers under the Student Temporary Employment Program, as was previously mentioned, Dept. If you do not presently take advantage of this while you're at school, you really should, because it's remarkable how you don't get paid what other people would get paid in the summer. They barely pay. They don't pay much above minimum wage, to be honest with you, but it really seems to look great on a resume for people. And the government will take in its own. It's remarkable. And government is a good place to be if you're in a situation where you're dealing with a disability. They rightly do lead the way in terms of, I think they could do more, but they do sort of set a good example to the private sector of what you could be doing to access a pool of talent that the private sector doesn't seem to access with any real success or frequency by the look of it. Maybe, I'm talking, I guess, more at the higher education levels. They seem to, have more trouble accommodating. I don't always know whether that accommodation is that they won't accommodate, or as previously mentioned, they just don't know what's expected of them as part of that accommodation. And that's something to keep in mind when you are dealing with them, is that they're probably, if you're nervous and afraid, they're probably equally nervous and afraid. Because if it's not working out, most business people are really good people. I work with them as part of my job. They don't want things to fail, and they don't want to be the jerk if things aren't working out. So they're really afraid of things, not working, because they want to help. This is something I feel that people should always also be aware of. I don't know if you have friends with disabilities who've told you some of the problems they've had with people not wanting to help them. I've never had that problem. I don't really know why. Everyone I've ever met has always been more than willing to help me. I don't know if that has something to do with, as your keynote speaker was talking about, building my brand. I'm not a wallflower. If I need something, I ask. I try and ask courteously. I try and use humor wherever possible. And it seems to work. I've been in the same department for 25 years, and I've been happy as a clam there. And I think it's as much social as it is anything else in terms of my ability to do my job. People come to me with problems, they figure I solve them. I solve my own, they figure I can solve theirs. So the keynote speaker, you really should revisit what she was telling you, because it's very important, to be quite honest with you. Something you also need to realize is transitioning to work is not I think I just said this, but it's not just a disabled issue. I've had previous summer students who are scared to death of what they're going to do when they get out of school and they don't have a disability to speak of. It's a hard, soul-sucking experience looking for work. It really, really is. And you're perfectly entitled to feel crappy about the fact that it's not going well. Just don't live there. Just don't stay in that moment. I had a guy I worked with. He actually came up to me and said to me, "Is this the real you, or are you putting on an act?" Because apparently I'm always cheery. I think Tim can attest to that. He's worked with me long enough now. I'm usually quite happy. And I had to tell the guy that basically it was a 90-10 proposition. 90% of the time, this is me. 10% of the time, people don't want to hear it. So I just suck it up and keep moving. You allow yourself a bad day and keep moving. That's what I've learned in dealing with people at work. Your disability is part of your life, and talking about it is a great thing. Talking about it too much, people start to feel like, it's a pity party going on. So it is a balancing act. You may not think you're doing the pity thing. You may not be intending to do it, and you in fact may not feel sorry for yourself. You're just talking about your life. But to them, they start feeling guilty, and it's weird. People have said this to me about how I don't talk to them in a pitying manner, and I said to them, "Well, do other disabled people?" And they said yes, and I know some of them. It's not Tim, because Tim doesn't do that. And I'm like, but they don't. They're just talking about their life. But I don't know if people feel guilty that you have to deal with all these things and they don't know what to say. And when people don't know what to say, they feel bad, right? I mean, it's just weird that way. I'm digressing. Anyway, long story with all that is to basically point out you really got to be careful about playing the disability card. Like, it can't be something where people are afraid to say something to you about what you can or can't do. It's a balancing act. It's a tightrope walking thing that it's really difficult, but you have to be really careful with it. People, it makes them uncomfortable. And I know it's not necessarily our job to make them comfortable, but it goes a long way. I don't know why, it just does. If you are students, looking around the room, I don't, from the age demographic, I don't know whether there are a lot of students here who are doing the transition or not. You've done the only sensible thing, right? You have to get training. You may have to be twice as qualified academically and training-wise as people you would be competing with. I would suggest that in addition to the regular academic training, if you do need special equipment to do your job, be way more informed than your employer. Be way more skillful at the use of that, so that when it comes down to a software that you need, tell them what which softwares are available. I now use a dictation software. My boss was like, when I asked him about purchasing it, his only question was, where would we get something like that? Like, that was the only question. So you give them the choices of the types of dictation softwares that are available, you tell them the prices, and I bet you anything, most of the time they'll go, which one works best? And you will tell them. So you should know what you need and what tools are available to you better than they will. It will help you, and it will help the people who are attempting to accommodate you. Beyond all that, that's really kind of all I had to say. I hope it accomplished what Tim wants to. I hope it didn't come off as negative. That wasn't my intention. If it did, I apologize for that. But apply for everything, really. Do you want to know how I got my job? Because I applied through the free press. Like, no intern programs, no programs like Heather runs. I applied, and I did it, of all things, to shut my mother up.
Did it work?
It did not, actually. I applied for it, and I was so convinced that this was not a job I was going to be getting, that I wasn't qualified for it, that when I went to the interview, it was like I was hanging out having lunch with my friends. Like, I was so ridiculously relaxed, it was insane. And lo and behold, I got the job. I've been with the organization and all its incarnations. I don't do what I do partly, but I don't do what I went to school for, believe it or not. Who knew? I'm good with computers. You know, like, I went for economics and business, so I understand what the department does, but I do a lot of work revolving around computers and databases, etc. So take advantage of the knowledge industry. It will serve you well. And I think that's it, unless Tim had anything else he wanted. Thank you for your time.